Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, hopefully you're not feeling misled by the title of this video and you're not thinking that I'm about to tell you how to run an open-ended campaign or what are my tips and tricks for knowing when you should stop or when you should keep going. I'm certainly not an expert on these things, and my opinions are just that. They're opinions. They're not facts necessarily. You know, they're probably pretty good. But these are questions you have to answer for yourself. I'm actually really pumped because tonight, fingers crossed, JDRD30, Francois Letarte, and myself will be able to role play through his confession to Father Augustin. We've been meaning to do that for quite some time because I ran the last session of our 4 GM All for One Regime Diabolique campaign, and Briscoe owes Father Augustin a confession, and so it should be kind of cool. It should be a hoot. So hopefully we get to do this around like 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here, and I'll probably post it as it's going, stream it live, and then put it up afterwards. But it should be a hoot. Probably won't be very long, which is fine. But it should be a lot of fun because Briscoe is just a great character. We've been wanting to role play that little scene, and Father Augustin is quite the little. He's a cool character, even though he only had a blip of screen time. So I'm looking forward to him having some more. Anyhow, this video is not about that at all, but it got me thinking because Francois uploaded today answers to RPG A Day 2014 questions because he never answered them. Neither did I, and he beat me to it because I was going to do a Blitzkrieg video myself. So I was watching like, man, I got to do that soon. He's kind of, he scooped me. But speaking of watching RPG A Day videos, I've been watching a lot of the RPG A Day 2017 videos, playing catch up. And I think somebody said kind of triggered this topic in my head. And it's certainly not a new topic for me. But as I was at work, it kind of dawned on me a couple of things that I never really thought of before exactly. And so this is not news to you if you watch my channel, but I play role-playing games because I don't want the story to end. I would read the Adventures of Narnia as a kid, and I wanted to be in Narnia. Maybe myself, maybe somebody else. I think I was a little enough kid. I wanted to be Ivan in Narnia and get away from my home life. I didn't want to be one of the Pevensey children. I wanted to be me. I would watch Star Trek or Star Wars, and I wanted to be another person in that universe. I didn't want to be one of those characters, but I wanted to engage in that universe. Now I would read a lot of fiction, watch a bunch of movies and TV shows too, but I wanted to be other characters in all these books. I didn't want the story to end. I wanted to keep going on, and maybe with whatever person I decided I was going to be. Sometimes I would think it was going to be me, but oftentimes I'm like, well, I want to be somebody cooler than me. So role-playing games were a natch. When they came along, it made perfect sense. But the problem is, and this is a preference thing. This is not saying my preference is good and yours is bad, or vice versa. The problem is when you play a one-shot or you play like a miniature, let's say what's called a 10-session campaign, the story ends. And in my case, I'm often left wanting more. I've played a bunch of one-shots. Usually I played in the one-shots rather than ran the one-shots. And I can tell you, the Hollow Earth one-shots we just did, where I got to play Halsey and I got to play Bruce Mulligan, I want those games to go on. I really started to like those characters. I started to like the other characters. I like Chuck. I like the, Doc Hollister, I think it was, Ed Midnight. I like those other characters. I wanted to see where that story went, what happened next. And it's a one-shot, so I don't get to find out what happens. The story's ended. I played in some miniature campaigns, and the story ended. It always left me wanting more. I can even tell you that the bigger campaigns I played in, sometimes they ended. A couple of them ended because I had some life issues going on, or they were just things I needed to go do. 5 years ago. But I wish sometimes those campaigns were still going on. I wonder what would have happened if we kept playing. So, for me, I want a story to end or a game to end when I don't like it or if it becomes boring, and as long, in my mind, as long as you don't get to the point where we've got Fonzie jumping the shark, we're okay. And if you're chronologically challenged, there was a show called Happy Days, and the character Fonzie, most people know who that was, Henry Winkler, before he was in Holes. And whatever TV dramas he was in. But Fonzie was pretty cool back in the 70s. And the problem was this show Happy Days was about the 50s, and over time, they had many, many, many seasons. And after a while, when you're a bunch of kids in the 50s, there's not too much you can do. They were in high school for about 15 years, or however many seasons they had, and they kind of they went through everything they could possibly do in that show. And they finally got to this point where Fonzie is going to jump a shark. on like water skis or something like that, and they had this big build up to that show. I was like, it was the stupidest moment in television, because they should have packed it in a long time ago. So, I get that, and there's many TV shows you can look at that, and that's become kind of a classic. You got Fonzie jumping the shark. They should have packed the show in like two seasons ago. And so you got these great shows that have this arc, and boom, it's over with, and you do it very artfully. But oftentimes, to me, I feel like it's Firefly, or it's like Invasion. If anybody remembers that, one season show about an alien invasion, where you're just like, oh man, I can't believe it's over. What happens next? And oftentimes for me, for those 10 session campaigns or the one shots, that's how it feels to me. And I'm not somebody that wants a written story arc or a planned story arc. I mean, I know it's not necessarily written, but this is what we're going to do from point A to point B. We're going to save the world or whatever. I've played in games like that, but it's not me. I like the play to find out mode. And yes, you can have little miniature arcs here and there within it. And there's a lot to be said for an ongoing campaign being a bunch of little stories. I mean, I think Nolan Inquisitor made that point a while ago. And, I agree with that. But to me, I like the story to go on. As long as we're not with, having Fonzie jump in the shark. And it's funny, Ron Blessing actually said something really cool. Actually, he was talking about emulating fiction, which I talked about last video, which to me is the whole point. I don't want the story to end. I want to emulate this fiction. I want to, be in there with the other characters somehow, or in something like it. But he's talked about the shiny thing syndrome, and he talked about how he doesn't necessarily stick to a lot of games, and he seems to be, if I get it right, he is kind of like a 10 session guy or a one shot guy, but more of a 10 session guy. He likes the miniature campaigns. He's not as into the longer ones because he has shiny thing syndrome. It's like, oh, I'd love to play this game over here. I like to play this other game over, and I get it, and I get it more than I have in the past because I've really gotten into exploring a whole ton of games. If you've been paying attention. And so I have some games I bought that are on my shelf that I want to play. I have some PDFs that I'm looking at, that aren't on my shelf but on the iPad. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. It's really neat. Some things I'm just looking at because I'm interested in exploring other systems. But other ones I'm like, I'd like to try this. I'd like to try that. So a whole bunch of games I want to try. However, for me, I never think about, like, I want to try a one-shot of that game. I always want to try something a little more open-ended. Or perhaps a miniature campaign, but just see how it goes. And maybe do we want to continue on this or not continue with it? So I get the shiny thing syndrome, but for me, I prefer, what it is like too much diversity for me leaves me feeling unsatisfied and ends up feeling a little too shallow in any area of my life. Whether it's musically or with things I read or just various hobbies or whatever. I'm kind of a specialist when it comes right down to it. I'm kind of a Renaissance man. One of my friends teased me all the time because I just, I knew a bunch about a bunch of stuff, but I prefer to kind of, focus on one or two things. And what happens a lot of times is you miss a lot of other things. But I prefer depth over width. There's something to be said for width, and I'm enjoying the shiny thing syndrome. And there's a lot of games and experiences I want to try, but a part of the appeal of role-playing games for me is that long open-ended campaign where we just explore what happens next. What happens next with the characters? What happens next in the world? Not because it's something that the game master is going to show us in his, giant grand story, but we interact in the world and, bump our heads against whatever's going on, and we kind of drive the bus as players. But I like the story to end when we all decide it's, maybe we're done with it before Fonzie jumps the shark. But for me, I like to not have a plan. I like to just kind of see where it goes until we've decided we've had enough. So yeah, that's my kind of rambly and somewhat personal. This is my opinion and preference. This is not gospel truth, in case you were wondering about why I prefer open-ended play. How about you? Got any insight on that? Are you an expert?